better than nothing.
All right, everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of the Squad Cobbler trilogy. We're bad at math. I am Mike Belinsky, and with me, as always.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
See, I am terrible with that. I need to put my social media thing on there, and I think there's a couple times I've forgotten it. So I'm at Official Pagan on almost everything. Thank you, Kelly. You're so much more professional at this than I am.
Yeah, that's the word for it. Totally.
Well, we're back to our Alice Cooper reviews that we know you guys love. I think this is going to be a pretty interesting talk this week because I'm kind of excited to talk about this one, and I've been getting the impression you are as well. We are up to From the Inside. So before we get to the track by track of this, what's your overall feelings on this one? And this is the part this and where you rank it are my most curious things because I have a feeling where we're both going to land on some of the tracks. But what's your overall take on this one?
So this one has a really special place in my heart because this was the album, the very first time I saw Alice Cooper in concert. It was the tour to support From the Inside, the Madhouse Rock Tour. And I saw him in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And so it's always kind of been special in my kind of Alice Cooper experience. So that piece has always been important. As we've talked about the way you break these albums apart, you had the Dark Two, and then you had the original Alice Cooper group, series of about 5 albums, and then you had the first three solo albums, Welcome to My Nightmare, Goes to Hell, and Lace and Whiskey. I don't consider this I consider those 3 a group. I consider the Alice Cooper group stuff a group, and those first 2 a weird group themselves. This is kind of a guy that to me stands alone, and I think a big part of that's because Bernie Taupin, Elton John's lyricist, was involved. So it's a very different Alice Cooper album, but it is one that I think a great deal of.
Well, I actually want to get and talk to you a little bit about the Bernie thing in a second. So it's interesting you mentioned sort of breaking them up into groups and stuff like that, because as we've kind of discussed, the Alice Cooper group stuff, barring the first 2 records, which in my mind are really just kind of like demos, and then the real Alice Cooper group records, and then you have the Alice solo stuff, which is way more. I mean, there was theatrical elements, there was conceptual elements in those early Alice Cooper group records, but that is really the focal point here. And one of the things we kind of talked about is that by the 3rd solo record with Lace and Whiskey, he was still going for that, but had really lost his way. And the storyline kind of only exists on the cover art. And then what he said talking about the album. And it's kind of a muddled record in that as a whole, and it doesn't really get its point across. I feel like this is a much more focused project, which is ironic coming straight out of a mental institution that you make a more focused record. You mentioned Bernie. I have 2 things with that. Do you think he helped get this focused, sort of in the way that Ezrin did with the Alice Cooper group? And you also, I still haven't watched Super Duper Alice Cooper yet, so is this the start of the Coke years? Those are my 2 questions for you.
So Bernie carries the burden for getting Alice into Coke. I think this is right on the cusp of it. So Alice has come off of he was in an institution. I had a alcohol problem, and so he kind of dried out and came out. And I believe he and Bernie had always wanted to work album. I believe that the introduction of cocaine occurred, my guess is, shortly after this. And you see it reflected in one. There's kind of a delay of about 2 years before we see the next album come out. And it's a substantially different Alice the next time we see Alice.
So do you think that the Coke was introduced at all during this album or after, or is this like the positive side of Coke, like it gets you up, get you focused, you're raring to go, and then by the next record are we going to start to kind of see that decline?
And it's only guessing in terms of kind of timing of it, but I think this was prior to any of that really taking hold. I think he's out, he's clean for the first time, he's working with someone who can bring kind of a lyrical sensibility equal to Alice's in a different way. But there are some very clear parts of this album that are not Bernie, that are Alice, in terms of one song in particular. It's just perfect Alice Cooper lyrics. But my guess is that any benefit of some initial focus, and actually the next album after this, while we step away from a theme, hangs together. And so I think there is a focus, but we also see Alice starting to change a little bit. So
Now, all right, aside from the cocaine, what else do you kind of think he brought to the table when he came to this record? Like, do you think that this is a Bob Ezrin sort of thing where he's pulling him out of a hole and into a more artistically focused direction? Do you not like that somebody else is contributing to Alice's lyrics? Where do you land on that?
Well, so I'm a big fan of Alice as a lyricist by himself. I think he needs no help. I think you get some interesting things with Bernie's involvement. So I find it's a very kind of different thing, different album overall. I don't have any issue with his participation there. I don't think he had Ezrin-like influence in terms of the overall kind of sound of the album. But a lot of this album is less about the sound and more about the story. And I think he did have influence on that.
And honestly, if there was any early concept records, it is the story, because I think one of the major complaints we both had about Lace and Whiskey is there is no story in Lace and Whiskey.
No, and it was advertised to have one. That was right. Set up to say, okay, there's a thread that's going to kind of run through this. I don't.
And really, it was just sort of the artwork and things that they said about it that created a story after the fact. I mean, there is some vague like Hollywood references and things like that, but there's no real discernible story in that. Unlike this one, where we really do have a focused story. And to me, before we even get into the tracks, I kind of wanted to touch on the artwork a little bit. What do you think about the album cover for this one?
So Alice has a long history of pretty amazing multifunctional album covers, whether it's the Killer album with the calendar, the $1 Billion Baby snakeskin wallet, the cardboard packing of Muscle of Love, and the book cover that was inside of it, and all those things. But while he has pushed the envelope on it, I don't think that this is to me the best execution of any kind of additional artwork with an album, because it's got flaps, it opens up, there are doors. Basically every character that's talked about here is represented. You open up on the inner sleeve and you can open up another door, and the liner notes have a picture of Alice that lines up right to the quiet room, the padded room, and Alice is in the quiet room. And so Alice has done a great job on a bunch of albums in terms of kind of adding an extra little treasure with the packaging, and I think this is the best one.
Yeah, I think all of the packaging is great. I think the way everything's arranged is awesome with the doors and flaps and all that kind of stuff. But even before you get to that, and this is kind of like, I'm a big album artwork kind of guy, and the cover image of Alice, and it's funny because we kind of talked about with Lace and Whiskey, the artwork has to create the whole story because there is no story on the record. To me, that picture of Alice on the cover sets up this story, this sort of dead-eyed staring.
Yeah, and if you look close at those eyes, it's a fisheye lens photo of most of the characters in the iris. You can see Jackknife Johnny and Nurse Rosetta, and all those folks are there. But
I can't wait to talk about Nurse Rosetta.
Yes, it's one of my favorites, and there are several fun ones on here. But yeah, it's great. And I was trying to go through. Now there had been, in terms of the group, some shots of the whole group on the cover, but this is the first one he'd gone into his solo. Well, I guess on Goes to Hell, his face was featured too. So, but this is like full makeup Alice and the whole deal. But it's the the standard, the classic Alice Cooper eye makeup, and it does just set the tone. So, for those of you who listen to Mike and I on Snarkalic Radio, depending on where I had set my camera up for the date, on sometimes you would see behind me a wall where I've got 9 albums hung up, who I felt had some of the greatest artwork of the albums I have, and From the Inside is prominently featured. And
now that you kind of touched on that, I'm going to get just off on a tiny bit more of a tangent here. So you mentioned, what are a couple of the other albums, not just Alice related, because artwork I think is important to both of us. Like, what's another great album cover, just to give people perspective?
So for me, and this is based off of album covers from my collection, I would have put Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus, but that's a double album and it was hard to fit in the frame, so I didn't do that one. But I did do London Calling from The Clash, which I think is one of the best album covers ever. And then Captain Beefheart's Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller, which features some of the artwork. Captain Beefheart is another one of my favorites. What would be
Well, it's interesting you said that because those are just such iconic album covers. As soon as you say that, even if you're not a Clash fan, everyone knows that London Calling image, that iconic image that's on the cover. So this is a record whose album artwork is so good, even before you get into all the cool stuff that they hid in there. The cover image is just so striking that it's instantly, in your opinion and in mine as well, up with some of the best album covers.
Agreed.
All right, do you want to start in on the tracks, or do you got anything else to say about the overall album first?
No, how about you though? Did any kind of going in commentary you'd like to add before we start to dig through the tracks?
No, the album artwork was really the big thing for me, and I the reason I wanted to focus on that for a minute was just because I remember it was really the Alice Cooper minus the first two, the Alice Cooper group records and Welcome to My Nightmare that I was introduced to as a kid through what my dad listened to. And then I remember going to a store and seeing this album cover and just feeling like I had to listen to that album.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that was I had the album prior to seeing the tour as well, but it was just, like I said, it was picture perfect no pun intended, in terms of an album cover.
All right, so let's get into the tracks. The first one is the title track, From the Inside. What are your thoughts?
So strong start does the job a first song should do. It kind of sets the framework, which is Alice telling you he got lost on the road somewhere. He wasn't sure if it was Texas or Canada. It's interesting because there are a lot of good, strong, I don't know if we want to call them pop songs. I mean, they are rock songs, but it's not that Bob Ezrin Detroit rock of Love It to Death or Killer. But it is good solid rock and roll. But it's not quite as driving. This song, to me, if you're gonna set it off and tell a story, it sets the framework. It's a really, really good song, and it's a killer. This is what he opened the concert with too, and it's just a perfect start to the album as far as I'm concerned. What are your thoughts?
I more or less agree with you. While it's not a Detroit rock song the way that the classic Alice Cooper group stuff was, it is a rock song. And my biggest complaint about the last couple of records is they were surprisingly lacking in rock songs for being Alice Cooper group records or Alice Cooper records. And that was really my biggest problem with Goes to Hell, is that Goes to Hell really just didn't have a lot of driving rock on there. And this is that. This does also start one of my few sort of quibbles with this album, though. And it's not just this album. This is sort of indicative of a lot of what happened or a lot of what came out of records in the late 70s and early 80s, rock records specifically. A lot of rock artists were introducing synthesizers into their music. And this is going to seem like a really odd complaint since I actually play synthesizer. Sometimes when artists introduce something into their music, they don't know how to blend it into the overall sound. And I think the first two tracks on this record, the synthesizers are actually too much on the songs. Like, they needed to be pulled back just a little bit. That's my biggest quibble with this album probably. And I like this song. So it doesn't hurt these songs for me in any way. And that was just it. It's a really common thing that you see, especially when rock bands introduce new elements. You saw it a lot in the 90s with a lot of artists trying to introduce electronic elements, and just instead of weaving it into the background and making it a part of their sound, it just sounded like it was slapped onto the mix. The synthesizers on this are a little bit heavy for me.
That's a fantastic point, and I hadn't really distilled it down before, but the beauty of Alice on most of his works across the board is from a strict guitar rock standpoint. The hooks, the just the overall framing and the prominence of guitar in some of his greatest stuff. He's at his best when he's guitar heavy, and this is a collection of some really great songs. But you would not depict this album as a guitar heavy album, and I think your point, in particular, is it gets sometimes even overly heavy towards the synthesizer on these first two, and it pops up a few other places as well. I wonder if that is some of Bernie's fault because
yeah, it very well could be. And again, though, I do think it's really indicative of those late 70s, early 80s records. A lot of rock artists and established rock artists and rock bands were introducing synthesizers, and that's a really cool thing. Obviously, I'm a fan of synthesizers, but it's a little heavy-handed sometimes when they don't know how to use it to augment their sound rather than put it up front where guitar should be on this song.
Yeah, and Davy Johnstone, typically Elton John's guitarist, the about 8 foot tall, long blonde haired guy, he played on the album played on the tour. He's also a guitarist that's pretty comfortable being in more of a keyboard dominated song environment.
Right. And just to give people an example of what I'm talking about as far as bringing more to the back, a lot of people don't realize the early Ozzy Black Sabbath records, a lot of those records have synthesizers on them, but they're just used to fill out the sound and to kind of augment the sound where it needs to be. Most people don't even realize that some of those classic Ozzy Sabbath songs have synthesizers in them. All you hear is the guitar and Ozzy's vocals. The synthesizers are just there to flesh out the sound. I think if Alice, and again, this is a really minor quibble. It sounds like I'm making a big deal about it, but I just wish it was a little bit more guitar heavy, a little less synthesizers on these first 2 tracks.
Agreed. Definitely.
It just keeps them from being perfect to me. Like the good songs that could have been great songs if they were a little more guitar driven.
Excellent point. I agree with that. I enjoy all this stuff, but I would, and that was all. And this is where we get to the rankings where I'm struggling mightily. Is that there's so much that's so good here, and it's just, but where's that punch on some of the things? It's just a slightly different. It's a different album.
It is. So we kind of already touched on it, but what do you think of the second track, Wish I Was Born in Beverly Hills?
Enjoy this song quite a bit as well. Also super fun in concert in terms of the full production of it. For those of you not familiar with it, it's Alice is going to start telling us about the people he's hanging out with in the asylum. And this is a song about a young lady who may or may not have been selling her wares on the street and was definitely there's some stuff going on there. But my favorite part of this whole song is when he talks about, I'm going to live it up, get my kicks and thrills, being Gigolo Lover, and send her the bills. And his delivery of Gigolo Lover is pure Alice and awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really like this song. It's a fun song. Same complaint about the first song, a little heavy-handed on the synthesizers. Had they pulled that back, brought the guitars a little more forward, it would have been a great song. And that's the only thing that kind of keeps it from being great. My one other quibble, and again, it's pretty prominent on the first 2 songs, my one other quibble with this album, and it's not just this album, it's the past few albums, I think the backing singers are a bit much. And while they do fit here and there, I like Alice's voice. So I want to hear more Alice and a little less of the backup vocalists.
Yeah, and Flo and Eddie, who were Mark Volman, Howard Kalin, who were from the Turtles to begin with, and were in Zappa's band for a while. Joined Alice here, and they'll pop up again in a later album or 2 as well. But they came, and their stock and trade is background vocals, and they've got tremendous voices. But
it's not a complaint about their backing vocals. Again, it's more, maybe it's the mixing that I'm getting at more. I just wish they were pulled back a little so that Alice is really on top of them, and they're just really backing him up.
Yeah, I'm with you, because it is, really it's fairly rampant in this album, is that the background vocals are pretty present, and could have been pulled back deeper in the mix, and that's really not something you've seen to a huge degree outside of No More Love at Your Convenience from earlier albums. So I mean, there's been background vocals, but these are a lot more prominent, and it doesn't, to your point, if you like Alice, you like to hear Alice sing, and he's not your typical background singer mojo.
Right, and it's not even using the background vocalists, and same thing with the synthesizers. It's not using the synthesizers. It's, I want the guitars up front and Alice's voice on top. All right, so this brings us to a particularly interesting one, the Quiet Room, because you already touched on ties in with the artwork, especially. I mean, all of them do, but we particularly get into the Quiet Room. So what are your thoughts on this?
Like this song too, quite a bit. It is to me Stephen without the menace of Stephen, which Stephen is a fantastic song. And so to fall a little bit short of Stephen is no major criticism, but I kind of find it a little bit in that space. There's a lot of reflection of Alice, and it's about them keeping him in a padded cell so he doesn't hurt himself. And you start to get that kind of growl and anger out of him as he gets towards the end about wanting to get his wrist to bleed, and he can't. And it's a pretty cool song. So again, another song I like quite a bit. Far from guitar driven, completely far from guitar driven, but to me a great song. and worthy of being talked about in the same sense with Stephen, but not quite at Stephen's level.
You hit on something that when I was re-listening to the album to do this show, it was something that was kind of gnawing at me and I couldn't put my finger on it, and you hit it perfectly by saying that this is something in the same vein as Stephen. Because when I was listening to it, it reminded me of something and I just wasn't putting it together. I think you completely nailed it with that. My only complaint, and this isn't a complaint about this song, it's more emphasizing what we already talked about with tracks 1 and 2. If the synthesizers were a little bit more pulled back and 1 and 2 were a little more driving, the quieter moments at the beginning of the song would have been that much more impactful and created more of an atmosphere. Because this is very keyboard driven in the beginning, which would have sounded way more atmospheric if we hadn't already heard so many keyboards up until this point.
I think you made a suggestion on the mix of this album that would make a great album even better.
What I'm really doing is trying to throw out there that they need to remix this album and make it perfect.
Could be done.
Anything else on the Quiet Room, sir?
Nope, but another, so far, love them. They're all good songs.
Yeah, no, that's an important thing, like, especially with me. I know it sounds like I'm picking on this album a little more, but I actually really, really like this album. My quibbles are small, and it's just that, as we kind of discussed on the previous couple episodes, it's because we like Alice so much that we focus in on these little things more. But I really am interested in your take on Nurse Rosetta.
Well, it's it's the standard tale. So so there's actually a song we'll get to on the back half of the album that I like better, but this again is because I lack depth of character and intellect more than anything else, that this other song speaks to me more, but we'll get to that in a bit. But man, this is an awesome song. Lyrically, the story, this is where, I've mentioned before that I'm a huge fan of Alice's ability to write lyrics and some of the wit that's there. And this one, he just puts the hammer down, because the song starts off with saying, this is a song about another roommate of Alice's in the institution is a priest who is being tempted. He's being tempted largely by Nurse Rosetta. And it starts off with, just lyrical gold where, I'm a shepherd for the Pentecost. I got my scriptures and my wires crossed. I got no kids. I got no home. They want us holy men to live alone. And I don't know how you do a better set of lyrics to start off a song than that.
Absolutely. This is easily, in an album with a lot of songs I like, this is probably my favorite. It's also safe to say not the Pat Boone song on the album.
He could get the wires crossed, but then it takes a turn.
Yes, sure. It would definitely take a turn. I hadn't listened to this album, at least not all the way through, in a while, and I knew going into it that this was my favorite song, and that was just reaffirmed listening to it again. In fact, I really felt like I need to listen to this song far more often than I do. And we kind of touched on the idea before, and I think we are doing this, of making our own Alice Cooper playlists. And I really think this is a strong contender for my playlist.
Yeah, and while I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of diversity between our two playlists, I think this may be some common ground here, because it's a magical song. When, again, with just the lyrics in terms of she popped the buckle of her Bible belt.
Which is actually my favorite line in the song.
Oh, really? I thought there might be a second set of lyrics that might have been.
There is, but that one always stuck with me.
It's a fun one. It's there are some mature themes in the song where Alice makes clear that the priest really, really likes Nurse Rosetta a lot.
So you kind of touched on something, and again, to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. So Alice and his lyrics has always kind of teetered on more mature themes and subject matter here and there, and definitely some darker elements and things like that. But I think he does it in sort of a clever, tongue-in-cheek kind of way. What are your thoughts on artists who write songs that sort of veer into this territory? Do you like songs that are more graphic, or do you like it when they're more clever with their wordplay and keep it more subtle?
I'm a bigger fan of the subtlety and cleverness. That I think it's sometimes a little easy to kind of just put the hammer down hard and just say, I'm going to startle you, I'm going to provoke you, I'm going to be very graphic here. And I don't think that's hard to do. What I think is hard to do is to kind of still be in that space and do it, but do it in a way that has that's got some wit and cleverness to it and subtlety. So the folks that just and it depends on the artist and kind of where they're coming from and what they're trying to do. But it's like to just kind of create more of a graphic song. If I prefer this where there's, but I'm a lyrics guy. I love well crafted, clever, well thought out lyrics. So you're going to kind of win the day with me when you do that. Your thoughts?
So I don't mind more heavy handed graphic lyrics, but I prefer this. Like, I think this is a little bit more intelligent. Alice is always kind of shaped. It's weird. Like, at least in anything I've ever written, I try to go a little bit more subtle with lyrics, and it's the total opposite when we do visual stuff. I go as extreme as I can and try to offend everybody and get as much attention as possible. With lyrics, I always try and kind of pull back, and that's definitely more of an Alice influence because he's talking about necrophilia in certain songs and all these different topics that you would think would be more outrageous than they are when you actually listen to them. And he manages to make clever, catchy songs out of them and still touch on these topics.
Yeah, it's necrophilia in the funnest sense,
Right. It's necrophilia for the whole family.
That's right. Family-friendly necrophilia, which would be a great band name.
They would be like a jam band, though, like a Grateful Dead kind of thing.
8-hour concerts. That'd be great.
All right, so here's an interesting one. Millie and Billy. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
So again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I like this song. This one is about as un-Alice as you can get, because now here we meet another couple folks that Alice is hanging with, which is a star-crossed lovers who ended up murdering the girl's husband, and that's what got them in the asylum. And it's sung as a duet between Alice, and I apologize that I can't come up with who he is duetting with. But I
believe it's Mercy something. Her first name is Mercy. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head. I should have pulled up the credits.
And she's got a very nice voice. It's a back and forth between the two. It's a much kind of gentler pace to it. It's a love song between the two. So you get the sense, okay, they're in love and something bad has happened and it's kind of going back and forth. And then it takes darker turns like, I don't want your love growing inside me. It's no prize for the love we once had. And, they gently are singing, oh, Millie, oh, Billy, criminally insane. And it's just really nice touches there. But my favorite, I've been stealing all the great lyrics here, so I don't know if you want to do the Baggies lyric or you want me to. But
go right ahead, sir.
I just, like I said, I was in lyric heaven with the intro to Nurse Rosetta. It's just, and then this one at the very end of the song, and to me, it makes this, it takes me from, this song's okay to, okay, I like this song. Because at the very end, you've got the sense that these two they're talking to each other. You're assuming like through the cell door or back and forth or whatever. He finishes up with, and I liked your late husband, Donald, but such torture his memory brings, all sliced up and sealed tight in baggies. Guess love makes you do funny things. Again, I was just so happy when I heard that. I just thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's really a great song. From the beginning of the song, like, you're in for something that's a little bit different. Just from the start of it, where the backing vocalists were a little too much for me on this. I love that this is a duet. I think that Mercy, whose last name I forget, unfortunately, did a great job on this song. I think the lyrics are great. This is a really good song. It would definitely be another contender for a playlist.
Yeah, it's, again, very different from a lot of things, but it's just really well crafted. I think the vocals and the lyrics and the story are all very, very strong in this. The music doesn't wow me in all of it, but it's largely there as a backdrop to the story you're hearing here, and so it's not intended to kind of carry, I think, as much water as the storyline.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's not a lot going on musically here, but that's okay because it serves the song.
And I believe the first Alice duet.
Is it? What about Donovan?
I guess that's a duet. You're right. So second Alice duet. First duet with a female. There we go.
There you go. Okay, so that moves us on to Sirius. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
Guess what, Mike? I like this song. We
This is definitely a recurring theme on this album so
yes,
far.
yes, it is. This is where when we get to rankings is what's causing me such great consternation. Probably, if not the heaviest rockiness song on this album, a narrow second. And so that's cool. It's a great storyline, and this is about a gambler who's with Alice in the institution, and who kind of loses all his money, and he took that serious. And great chorus. This one does feature guitar a little more significantly than most of the other album songs do. I don't know how you can not like Serious from My Blood in terms of and this feels like an Alice song from you could hear this on another album of Alice's.
Yeah, definitely. This is a great straightforward rock song, a little more guitar driven, the way we like it. And this is where we've touched before on how important sequencing is on these albums. It's great after Millie and Billy, which is so different, has such a different feel to it. This is a great like punch right after that.
Yeah, it is, and it kicks off side two, and gets your attention in a hurry. And great drums in this. Clever lyrics, clever chorus, fun, a real toe tapper.
It's also, I believe, one of, if not the shortest song on the record. So that's a good way, like a good short driving rock song is a great way to kick off side two. Because again, I'm a vinyl guy, so the splitting of the sides is important to me. This is a great way to do it.
Agreed. And then to come back to your point on the first album about the same place on the album, this is another place too with, hey, it's great. You've got very talented backup singers. You don't need them to carry very much water on this song. And while they don't come forward as strongly as they did on side one, they could have been pruned here a little bit as well.
Yeah, and that's for me anyway, like my overall, and again minor because I really like this record, my overall quibbles with this is I just wish the backing singers will pull back and the synthesizers will pull back. And that brings us to How You Gonna See Me Now. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Not as fully developed as I would like. This is one that I struggle with. We are now on Alice's fourth ballad. As he's done the solo work, each of the albums had a ballad on it that did well on the charts. This did well on the charts as well. And I still like I Never Cried better in terms of an Alice ballad than this song, but it serves a really important role in this album because to a certain degree it's a very kind of honest accounting of he's been away, he's going to come back, how's that going to go? And it's done in a really kind of sincere way. There are a few moments in this where I think the lyrics get slightly trite, which is incredibly unusual for an Alice song, but it really does the job of painting a pretty sincere picture and heartfelt picture of, okay, I'm coming back. How's this going to go? And so it fits well in the album. It's got a job to do, and it does it really well. I think, like I said, I Never Cried's a stronger ballad overall, but it fits in the album well, and it's a good song.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good song. I don't think it's as good as a couple of the other ballads. What's weird a little bit on this track to me is I agree that I think it's a really sincere song. I like the sentiment. I like the overall theme that he's going for here. But at the same time, I also feel because he had chart success with those other ballads that it weirdly feels like sincere and contrived at the same time.
It is. It does. I mean, it fits so well in the storyline that you don't go that it's totally calculated because this is kind of probably a part of the story that need to be told and probably told in this fashion. But I do think that him going like, these ballads seem to do pretty well. I think I need another one of those. It did
Right.
feel like, hey, this is my I Never Cry. This is my Only Women Bleeds. This is my You and Me off of this album. So, and I think the fact that it's the fourth, we've had 4 albums in a row that's had one of these that was released as a single. There at least might be some undercurrent of the finances here in terms of this is probably a necessary, easy. So I think calculated. There's a little bit of that in there too. But again, it does. It wasn't just stuck in there in terms of what it gets after. Makes perfect sense for the album.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and that's why it kind of sits a little bit weird for me because it does feel really sincere and it fits the story, which is great. But at the same time, you do get that sort of calculated, well, they've done it 3 other times and it's worked out really well. Let's go for a 4th.
Exactly.
And that brings us to For Veronica's Sake. Thoughts?
This is my song. This is my jam on this album. I'm embarrassed to say. This is a song about Alice missing his dog because he's in the insane asylum and the dog's not. He's worried about his dog getting gassed. As you can tell, deep intellectual thought on this album. So I feel bad that this is like my favorite song on the album because everything else is, there's a story being told here about the different kind of characters he's met and what he's going through and all that. And then we come across this song about he's worried about his dog getting the gas. But he is sincere in his desire to save his dog. And I think that's what speaks to me the most. But it is, I think, the maracana's song on this album in terms of guitar and drive. It's a little on the silly side, given the topic matter. I don't know why he's never done this in concert, because I totally think this would kill in concert.
So this has never been played live?
I don't believe so. Not even when I saw him on the tour supporting it, he did not do For Veronica's Sake, which I don't get because this is absolutely a stage song. There's
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a song that to me sounds like it would make so much sense in a live setting.
As we mentioned before, many of Alice's songs are great, and they reach this whole other level when he plays them live. And this would have been one, absolutely, I think. But we can check the records, but I do not think For Veronica's Sake has ever been on a set list, which is a crime.
Yeah, that's crazy because it seems like such an obvious one to be on.
Yeah, I don't exactly get why, because there's nothing about it that would make it difficult to do live. So I don't quite understand it, but I feel a little goofy saying it, but I love a lot of songs on this album. But if I'm presented with the album, said you can only listen to one song on this right now, I'll be like, I'll have some Veronica's Sake, please.
So I'm on the best, most trusted source of all information online, Wikipedia. And according to Wikipedia, all of the songs on this album have been heavy parts of live set lists with the exceptions of Millie and Billy For Veronica's Sake and Jackknife Johnny. Those are not played live.
I get 2 of those completely. I do not understand why For Veronica's Sake.
Yeah, that does seem like the odd man out of those 3 to not, be a regular fixture of live shows. But it says that during that entire period, every other song was a regular part of the set list.
Don't get that. What do you think about For Veronica's Sake? You won't hurt my feelings.
I do like it. It isn't my favorite song on this album, but it is a song that I really enjoy. And again, there really hasn't been one so far that we talked about that we haven't liked. So that speaks very, very highly of this record. And particularly talking it out, I think it's going to make, for me anyway, my choice of where this falls on the list is going to be pretty tough.
That's where I've been struggling, the existential struggle. But we'll get to that momentarily because I'm still not exactly sure.
So I have a question for you. Since your list is all willy-nilly with ties and everything, do you think at some point, or would you at some point, consider changing something on your list as we talk out an album?
I think it could happen because every new album we talk about, and this is a really good example of it, makes you start to kind of reassess some of the other ones. As well. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that at some point I might say, you know what, upon further reflection, I gave this album a little more credit or not enough credit in the mix. But this is one that struggled because kind of going into this, there's a certain group I'm like, okay, that's set. That's not going anywhere. We'll go on through this. And then this album comes along and I'm like, crap, I need to reflect. I can put your mind at ease. There will not be a 3-way tie for Alice. So that won't happen. That won't happen. And willy-nilly, I have one tie. I don't think that's officially willy-nilly. And
I don't know. To me, there can't be ties. But anyway.
I'll fix that.
So moving on to number 9 and there is 10 songs on this album. And one of the things we kind of touched on was there was a couple albums there where intros were getting their own tracks to maybe make it seem like the albums were a little bit padded. But there is 10 full songs on this album. And Jackknife Johnny is the next one, which is one of the 3 songs that apparently, according to Wikipedia, wasn't played live. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
And I get that. I think that this would be a tough one to pull off live with a band. I think it could be done, but I think this would be a tough one to do it. So there isn't a song on this album I don't like, but if I were to put them in order, I would say Jackknife Johnny actually is of this album. I think I have about everything else ahead of it. I can't exactly explain why, because this is a story about a war veteran who is suffering post-traumatic distress. Paint's pretty effective picture of that. It's executed well, again, lyrically. This is one, I don't know, we talked about, Millie and Billy, the music didn't have a lot to do. Its main job was to let the story play out and do it. I think that's somewhat true for this too, but I find I'm just not as big a fan of this relative to the other songs. As a standalone song, I think it's a good song. I think it absolutely fits in the album. It makes really good sense. It's interesting. It's not a skip for me, but again, I feel like an intellectual giant here. It's no For Veronica's Sake. so here's my point is that when I'm weighing what songs I like better, the song about him missing his dog and worrying about it getting gassed, I place above a very heartfelt story about a military veteran having trouble. But I do.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page with you. Not with For Veronica's Sake being the best song, but with Jackknife Johnny being my least favorite on the record. Not to say that I don't like it. It's just this is a strong album, and it's not a skip, but it's not my favorite, and it's probably the weakest song of these 10.
I think so. It's Walking Amongst the Giants. There are a bunch of other very, very good songs here for it. So for it to be somebody's got to be the worst song on there, and it happens to be that the other ones I think are stronger. And I'm fairly certain before we're done, you will come around to realize that For Veronica's Sake is the best song on the album.
You think you're going to win me over on that?
I think it's science. It's a fact.
Well, then let's go right to the last song, and then we can kind of start talking about the more important things, like where this lands on our list, why For Veronica's Sake should be my favorite song, and the most important feature at this point, the Pat Boone song.
Yeah, that's going to be you get to go first on that, by the way, just so you know.
So Inmates Were All Crazy.
So here's where I'm at on this song. We have just traversed through 9 songs pretty tightly held together in terms of a storyline, covering a lot of territory, many different approaches to it, some very silly, some's a little more serious, a lot of cleverness through there, the amazing Nurse Rosetta earlier on. So it's been just, strong, lots of really great things. And so there's this huge amount of weight, as I've kind of expressed in previous ones, that for concept albums, how you end it is really, really important. And I felt on some of Alice's strongest stuff that he's done so far from a concept standpoint, sometimes that capper song, like particularly in the Goes to Hell's framework, and even a little bit with Welcome by Nightmare, wasn't quite as up to the task. I think the order, it's a tall order for Inmates to wrap this album up and kind of put a bow on it. And I think it does. I think there are stronger songs on this album than this, but I think it's the right song to end it. Again, kind of a clever one. It gets a little anthemic with everybody singing about We're All Crazy. So that's a little bit on the nose to a degree for this album. But I think it does its job in that you've just gone through a great album. It's coming to close, finish strong, kind of put a bow on it. And I think it does all that. There are just other moments in this album that I like a lot better than this. It's a tough job to be the last song on this album. I think it does a very serviceable job as the last song.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good song to wrap the album up with. It's not my least favorite song on this album, and really there is no song on this album I don't like. My only, I guess, minor complaint with it, which you already hit on, is it is a little bit on the nose. In an album that's otherwise really clever in its presentation, this is just, everybody's crazy. Yeah, so it's a little on the nose there, but that's a minor complaint in an album that is so strong.
We're definitely on the same page, and it's just having a song about being crazy at the end of this It's a little on the nose, but it's still it's fun. There's some pretty clever little moments in the song. It wraps it up. It wraps it up pretty well. It would have been neat to kind of have it finish off with something that was maybe a little more driving, didn't kind of lean in so hard to the we're all crazy stuff, but still it makes sense, and I do enjoy the song.
I completely agree. And now the hard part starts, sir.
Oh boy. How
about before we try and pick the positioning, why don't we start with the Pat Boone song?
And as we've established, by state law, you have to go first.
So this one's a little bit tough for me. I'll explain why. So the Pat Boone song for me is How You Gonna See Me Now. I think it's the most suited for his style. It's a ballad. It actually fits with, because if you remember when Pat Boone did his Alice Cooper cover, in his mind he was going for an edgier look to get a younger audience interested in his weird gospel music. So it's the obvious choice, but there's a part of me that wants to say Nurse Rosetta. Because one, I think just because I want to hear Pat Boone sing Nurse Rosetta, but also because I do think, like, if you went through the album, we kind of talked about how it's a little bit more of a subtle approach to the subject matter than other people would have taken. And I think just maybe there's a chance that Pat Boone wouldn't have understood the song. He would have really misinterpreted it, just heard the parts about the clergyman and ran with it.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure when he talks about, singing, fantasizing silk suspenders on her thighs, that he might start to tune in a little bit. I think as that particular lyric set continues, I think he would go, I'm suddenly, whoopsie. He would have done something.
But just imagine the beautiful moment of watching Pat Boone sing this and not be in on the joke.
That would be pretty remarkable. Good choice.
But in all seriousness, though, it would probably be How You Gonna See Me Now, because he would have tried to twist that into, him coming out with this different image and in his mind different sound that was going to be edgier and pull a younger audience.
It's possible. I could see that, and I would absolutely pay serious bank to hear Pat Boone sing Nurse Rosetta, because that would be. And
again, I'm not saying Pat Boone's so stupid that he wouldn't get the song, but maybe he's so stupid. Yeah, I'm not saying he's not that stupid though. Like, there's the possibility, however slim. I want to be in that universe.
I like the call. I think it's good. I'm gonna go a little different. I'm gonna kind of channel my inner Pat Boone here. And I think he's gonna listen to the album and he goes, you know what? I probably need to pick the best song on this album to sing. So he will immediately go to For Veronica's Sake because of its awesomeness. And then he will ruin it, and I will hunt him down and kill him because he will sing the whole song, and I'm absolutely convinced at the end he'll go, woof, 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 or something like that, and I will hunt him down.
Oh, you're 100% right. That is how Pat Boone would sing that song. And you know what? It is a good choice, because that's another one where he would probably feel like he could relate to the subject matter. I'm sure he has a dog or has had a pet, so he's going to relate to it in that sense and not really, again, probably not understand the overall concept of the record and just think it's a song about a dog lover.
And if, there's a line in there about she can get pretty weird, and I'm sure he's going to play with that, and kind of deliver it in a Pat Boone-esque way that will completely justify me in the court case when I explain why I had to kill Pat Boone.
He just Pat Boone the whole thing up. I had no choice.
Your Honor, listen to the original, listen to Pat's version, case dismissed.
I should be getting a medal here.
That's right.
All right, well, I think we're up to the genuinely difficult part now. Where is this going to fall on your list, sir? This is a good album. It's not up with the perfection that is Love It to Death and the near perfection of Billion Dollar Babies for me, but it is also not anywhere near Easy Action and Pretties for you.
And I would agree that the equally awesome Billion Dollar Babies and Love It to Death are safe. And so for me, it came down to looking through the list. What I got sitting at number 3 right now, what we both have sitting at number 3 right now, is Killer. And that's an original Alice Cooper group album that is Detroit rock, that is serious guitar through the whole thing. And there are Under My Wheels, Be My Lover, I mean, just incredible high points. And so this is where I struggle, because so I said, so it is circling Killer. Is it going to replace Killer as number 3 or not? Is the question that I've been going through. I have no concerns at all in my list. Welcome to My Nightmares, the next one after that. I have this above that without a question. But it comes into that. And so where I struggled with is there's the highs in Killer are higher than any part of this album. The lows in Killer, not that there are like a lot of lows in Killer, but they're a teeny bit lower than that. So I'm kind of thinking of You Drive Me Nervous and Yeah, 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 which are 2 very great songs. But, you know, From the Inside kind of sits between the highs and lows of Killer. But as we've talked through it, when I pretty much had to say, wow, I really like this song. Wow, I really like this song. Why I really like this song. And we're ranking albums versus individual songs, I'm going to put it at number 3. I'm going to put it ahead of Killer. And the only reason I'm going to put it ahead of Killer is that I think there are songs on Killer that blow From the Inside Out of the Water. I mean, there is no Under My Wheels on, even though For Veronica's Sake might come close. It's not, it's not Under My Wheels by any stretch of the imagination. But as an album, as an entire collection of work, by the slightest of margins, I'm going to put it in number 3. And this was not easy because Killer's an awesome, awesome, awesome album.
So I had the exact same struggle going into this as you did. This is a really good album from front to back. There is not a song on here that I don't like. There is no skips on here for me. My quibbles about the synthesizers and the backing vocals are minor. And the reason that I made such a big deal about them for being minor is because, to me, that's what keeps this album from being great. And while I think you're right, this is more consistent than Killer, you also hit on the reason that I'm making it number 4. There's no Under My Wheels on this record. So it's got to be, for me, it's got to be number 4.
I think you can very legitimately kind of make the case either way. I think those 2 albums are very much, while very, very different albums in terms of quality, they're a different conversation than, well, the albums above them and the albums below them. So I think
right. And I agree that this is actually a little bit more consistent than Killer because it doesn't dip quite the same way the Killer does on its weaker moments, but it also never quite gets as high as something like Under My Wheels, and that just puts Killer just slightly above this for me.
Yep, we went through the same math, rounded slightly different at the very, very end, but very much the same math. So great. We started doing this because we're huge Alice Cooper fans, and we love a lot of his stuff, absent the first 2 albums, as we kind of noted. But this one here was a complete pleasure to talk about. If you're, for whatever reason, don't have a lot of Alice Cooper albums in your collection, this is one that's worth a look.
I would even say, like, after you get a couple of the Alice Cooper group albums, this might be the first one you want to delve into as far as the solo stuff goes.
I'd agree wholeheartedly, and I think that'll hold for a while. There's some pretty cool stuff coming up, but this one's a real safe bet that at the point at which you're like, okay, I get the Alice Cooper group, and I like that, and that's really good. Now I want to go into the solo section. This is a great place to start because it's going to be a lot different than other things you're going to run across later, but it's a really good album. So I'd give it a listen.
It's strong, it's focused, it's consistent. If I was telling somebody, if someone came to me and was like, where do I start with Alice Cooper? Obviously, I'm going to point them towards Love It to Death, then $1 Billion Babies, and then Alice solo. This is where I would tell them to start.
Yep, I would too, absolutely. Because I think, and it's a good gateway drug to Alice. If you're looking to get in, if you're not ready to talk about dead babies or you're not ready to do that, this gets you into kind of getting the vibe of Alice. He growls sufficiently through this album, but it's good. It's good kind of comfortable entry to there. But definitely from a solo standpoint, it's one of his strongest things.
Completely agree.
Well, that wraps up episode 24, Squat Cobbler.
And our 11th Alice review.
Wow.
And there's a lot of Scooby-Doo porn in general that I didn't know existed until the last couple weeks.
You must be so proud.
I'm just proud of myself that I got through my entire recommendation without using any objectionable language.
Okay. Want to be cool like Alice Cooper, do coke.